Greetings from Gotham, everyone. My name is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've prepared another list video for all of you. Today we're doing a top 5 of sorts. We're going to be doing 5 Batman comics I wish I could reread again for the first time. I know that was a bit of a mouthful, but essentially I got nostalgic looking at my Batman collection and thinking about different books I just remember loving going through the first time and wanting to recapture that feeling. I'm really eager to share my list with you. I picked a couple that might surprise some. I didn't just go for the classics, so to speak. Anyway, before we jump in there though, I just want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link in this video's description, and if you find something you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, The Comic Book Report, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. First up, I'm going to be talking about Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. This is the Omnibus Edition Volume 1 of a 2-volume set, collecting the entirety of their Batman run. Now admittedly, this is a book and a run that I feature heavily on this channel, and for good reason. This is my favorite Batman comic run of all time that I've had the pleasure of reading. This really just revolutionized the way I looked at modern comics. This came out right around when I started collecting comics for myself, and I was just absolutely floored. Particularly by that first story arc, The Court of Owls, Night of Owls. It's just an absolute modern classic in my opinion. I think for me, why this is something I want to reread again for the first time is I want to recapture that feeling I had when I first got an ongoing Batman title that was coming out right like on the stands right when I was reading. I loved feeling like, okay, this is my Batman. This is the title I'm looking out for. This is the one I'm going to be picking up the subsequent volumes. I'm hooked. I'm in. I'm like #1 fan here. So why I put it on the list of one I want to reread again for the first time is I would like to capture that feeling of right when I started collecting all over again. I want to do that in addition to just experiencing the Night of Owls, the Court of Owls storyline. This is just one of my favorite kind of mystery thriller Batman stories where there's this clandestine group running around Gotham, made up of kind of the Gotham elite behind the scenes, and Batman disputes their existence, and he thinks, this is my city. If anyone should know of this group's existence, I should know, and he's just kind of put off balance. And I really love that. I think that was a really novel approach to the Cape Crusader, really throwing off his confidence level. It kind of really brings up some of his past in interesting ways. I don't want to spoil all of that here, but it is a really thrilling and interesting story arc, and that's just the establishing story before Snyder and Capullo continue their run with Death of the Family and 0 Year and so much of what comes after. This is really a thrilling time in comics history, at least for me. If I didn't say it already, this is part of the New 52 era for DC Comics. If you're not familiar with this was kind of a soft reboot, retcon of their continuity. The idea was they were starting all the titles over again with an issue 1. They kind of played fast and loose with the history of these characters. They aged them down, and they made it kind of younger, fresher, and an easier on-ramp for newer prospective readers. I understand that it's alienated some of the longer-term DC fans as a general rule, but I think it ushered in this whole new generation of comic book fans, of which I am one. So I really have a soft spot for the New 52, and this title, amongst all the others, is my absolute favorite, the crowning jewel, so to speak, for me. And honestly, I would relish the opportunity to reread this again for the first time. If you've never read it, I cannot recommend enough Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Next up on today's list, I'm going to be talking about Batman Hush by Jeph Loeb and Jim Lee. This, for me, is an iconic Batman storyline as well. I've heard some people compare it to The Long Halloween and just find it more subpar compared to that storyline, and I totally understand that perspective. I think if you're looking for a tighter kind of detective thriller murder mystery, I do think The Long Halloween is the more superior Jeph Loeb Batman work in this regard. I would even put Dark Victory before this as far as just a tight detective story. But if you're just looking for a ton of fun with some of the most gorgeous art I've ever seen, Batman Hush might still have a ton to offer you. I think for me, why I would love to reread this again for the first time is that this was a storyline that when I read it, I was really exposed to the artwork of Jim Lee. Granted, I had seen some of his older stuff, I had dabbled a bit, but I had never seen his art this polished, this lush, this beautiful. For me, this artwork has always been set apart, and in fact, if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you might know this is my example for my favorite comic book art of all time. And right now, I might have some people tuning out, and that's okay. I know opinions on art can be so subjective, but for whatever reason, this to me is just the top comic book art I have ever experienced. I love the pencil work, I love how immersed I feel in Gotham City. I think everything just looks so beautifully colored, everything just seems to pop right out of the page. I just think the character models are fascinating, the sense of action, the panel layout, everything just hit right on for me. And I just adore it. I could read this story again and again, even just for the visuals, and never get tired of it. So when I think about rereading something for the first time, I think about experiencing this art for the first time. Yes, the story is great. Yes, I'm a huge Batman fan, but it's this artwork. It's this art that really grips me here and makes me want to come back and makes me nostalgic for the first time I ever experienced it. I remember just feeling like it was a whole nother level of talent, and I just couldn't believe it. As far as the storyline, it is still kind of a detective story. We have Batman sustaining a head injury at the very beginning of the story arc, and from then on he's basically trying to figure out who this mysterious figure is who's trying to thwart him from the shadows, someone appearing to be going by the name Hush. It's really interesting and kind of shadowy and mysterious, but it takes him going through all of his rogues gallery of villains, or maybe not all of them, but a good handful. We get an exposure to a lot of the Bat family, the supporting Batman Gotham characters. So this is also a really fun read for newer readers that really want to get a scope of a lot of the mainstays in the Batman universe. Yes, it does pay off some older storylines, and the more you know about Batman, I think the better the story is, but I do think it's fairly accessible to new readers, and like I said, it can be a great experience to get you immersed in the world of Batman. Next up for me, I'm going to put a fairly modern book as well, Batman White Knight by Sean Murphy. So this is actually spun off a series of White Knight titles. They've had Curse of the White Knight, which I've read and reviewed on the channel, as well as the kind of spin-off with Harley Quinn in this White Knight universe and Beyond the White Knight, at least at the time of the recording. So there's been a couple spin-offs of this book, but this is what really started it all. This is the Batman Black Label title, Batman White Knight. Being part of the Black Label collection at DC, this is intended for more mature readers, and it's outside of the main continuity or canon, but still an absolutely riveting Batman story. One of the things I like about this is that a central component to the plotline is basically the Joker becomes sane and Batman is treated as more of the monstrous villain in many ways, just because of his brutality and his unapologetic stance on how he enacts justice. And it kind of flips a lot of the conventional Batman dynamics on their head. What would happen if Joker used all of his powers for good? What happens if Batman crosses the line a bit? What happens in this world? And honestly, there's so much adventure and kind of blockbuster kind of feels in this storyline that it just really, it just got me. I really enjoyed this story. I don't even know if I've done a full review for this first volume on the channel, but it's a really great book. I think it stands alone perfectly well as a standalone graphic novel, although the sequels are really great and they build up the mythos of this whole alternate Gotham City, and I just really dig it. Why specifically I'd like to reread it is because this just really captivated me. This is one of my favorite Batman kind of what-ifs or Elseworlds kind of Batman stories. And it's a great example for me of a modern creator just doing something with absolute excellence. I have no doubt that this will be considered a modern classic Batman work, and if it doesn't, I have no idea why it wouldn't. This is written and illustrated by Sean Murphy. We have this creator doing double duty on this title, and it is really impressive to me. It is a pretty tight narrative as well. It's not overly long. And frankly, it's really well paced. I think for me, rereading this again for the first time, I would just love to experience just that feeling I got of just picking up a great Batman graphic novel. I think sometimes it's so easy to get bogged down in just years of continuity or long comic book creator runs, which I often love, but sometimes you just want to curl up and read a book in one sitting and just get a full effect, beginning, middle, and end, and just have a really kind of just defined storyline. And that's really what this gave me. And I had this highly recommended, but when I finally read it a few years ago, I just remember being so thrilled, so satisfied, and I just really enjoyed that feeling. Don't miss out on Batman White Knight. And hey, if you're still listening to this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I just want to encourage you to do so. I'm always doing list videos, comic reviews, hauls, and more. Thanks for considering. Now let's keep this list going. Next on the list, we have Batman Incorporated Volume 2, Gotham's Most Wanted by Grant Morrison, part of the New 52 era of DC Comics. So this might be an unconventional choice, but I'm going to justify it momentarily. I'm going to tread lightly around spoilers, but for those that don't know, this is the culmination of the Grant Morrison era on Batman. So these stories, I believe, are included in that last Grant Morrison Batman Omnibus, I believe Volume 3, but I still have a lot of paperbacks and hardcover collections that build out that Morrison run. Hopefully one day I can upgrade to an omnibus, but for me, this is the collection I think about when I think about the culmination of Morrison's time on Batman. And for me, this is a masterstroke. This is the way you finish a comic book run, in my opinion. I think for fans of Damian Wayne, the son of Batman, Robin, this is one of his crowning achievements, moments as a character. We have a stunning battle sequence with him in this book. We just see him ascend to this amazing level of heroism, and honestly, we get to see just some of the Bat family just pushing it to the limits. We have this ultimate confrontation between the Bat family and Talia al Ghul and her crew of people, and honestly, so much of Morrison's run built to this climax, and it really pays off, especially for longtime readers of this run. Unlike some of the other entries on my list, this is not necessarily a book I think you can just pick up and enjoy. I do think you're going to need more backstory. I think you would need to read definitive portions of Morrison's time on these Batman books. Maybe not everything, but the more you can read from Morrison, the more this will really pay off for you. Why I would love to reread it again for the first time is because this was one of the first comic book runs I read in its entirety that was just finishing as I was getting into comics. Again, this is the New 52 era. I mentioned earlier in the video, that's right around when I started collecting. So I collected all of these back-issued collections from Grant Morrison on Batman, and I was able to catch up right for the conclusion of this run. Now, admittedly, I still do prefer the Snyder Capullo era of Batman, but Morrison's era is definitely no slouch. This is easily one of my favorite Batman runs I've had the pleasure of reading as well, and honestly, it has one of the most stunning conclusions, like I said, I've ever had the privilege of reading. And I remember all the buildup after reading so many of the different trade paperbacks and standard edition hardcovers for all of these different Batman runs, Batman and Robin, Batman Incorporated, Batman, all of these different books that Morrison had involvement in throughout the run. Just all of it culminated with this Batman Incorporated book, and it did not let me down. It's like when you finally get a payoff and you finally read something and it just sticks the landing. That feeling, that's the feeling I want to relive, and that's what I had when I first read this book. I would love to feel that again. And if you've never read Grant Morrison's run on Batman, Batman Incorporated, Batman and Robin, I highly encourage you to check it out. You can find some of those smaller collections like me, or seek out the omnibus editions. And last but certainly not least on this list today, we have Batman Gotham by Gaslight by Brian Augustyn and Mike Mignola. This is another fantastic Batman kind of Elseworlds title. What I mean by that is it's outside the mainstream continuity, and it's kind of telling a what-if Batman ... kind of story. I have this book in a trade paperback. Admittedly, this is an older edition. I do think they have current kind of reprints of this in paperback that have come out in recent years, so you should still be able to find it if you haven't read this yet. Now, to set the stage here, what is Gotham by Gaslight? Essentially, it's a Victorian-era tale that basically pits Batman against Jack the Ripper, which is such a mind-blowing and fascinating concept to me that I just think it's really interesting right from the jump. I think the premise of this is excellent, and the execution even more so. Now, Brian Augustyn's work, I'm not really familiar with. If you have other recommendations of what he's done, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Mike Mignola, I know he's really popular for Hellboy, amongst some other works there, so a very prolific comic book creator there. The art in this book is absolutely wonderful. I love all the attention to detail, not just for the character models, but honestly the settings. I think that this is a story that has such an immersive sense of place, the detail work and all the buildings and architecture. It's just all really beautiful. And to have kind of a turn-of-the-century Batman fighting just one of history's most notorious criminals, it's just a really novel way to approach a Batman story. This is another one that's pretty tight. It's a pretty quick story, but it just really works. It's super effective. I know that there was also a DC animated film for this property. I have watched it, and while I did enjoy it, they did change a ton of stuff for that animated feature. So if you've seen that, let me just tell you, this is a completely different storyline here for the most part. They've changed a lot of stuff. I highly recommend reading the comic as well. And if you already enjoyed the animated feature, great. You might still enjoy this or might enjoy it more as I did. Why I would love to reread this again for the first time is that this is another example of what can be done with comics that just kind of break the box I put them in, if that makes sense. I hadn't read a lot of kind of Elseworlds or what if titles. I hadn't read a ton off the beaten path of these main continuity books. I really have always loved the big two, Marvel Comics and DC Comics, but honestly it can be a little bit rinse repeat with all of the superhero narratives. So every so often I like when people take approaches with these characters that I haven't seen before. And doing a period piece and having Batman fight Jack the Ripper, well, frankly, that fit the bill. I was so satisfied by this work. I loved the writing. I loved the illustrations. And I remember just being captivated that this could even be done. I was just so pleased with it, and I would love to recapture that feeling that, wow, you can do so much with these characters if you just do them well. A really great book. Definitely don't sleep on it. If you've never read Gotham by Gaslight, I highly recommend it. And just like that, that's going to round out our list of 5 Batman comics I would like to reread for the first time. This was just a fun trip down memory lane for me. Frankly, I wanted to revisit, even if it was just in a video like this, some of my favorite Batman works. I tried to mix up the list too. I don't want to just keep recycling every same book I always talk about, even though I had to throw in the Snyder Capullo era and Batman Hush. But so hopefully some of these other entries were surprising and fun for a lot of you. If you haven't read some of these titles, I do thoroughly recommend them, as I said in the video. And honestly, there are so many great Batman books that make me super nostalgic, and I wish I could go back and read again for the first time. To that end, I'm sure I've missed a ton. If you have Batman books that you're really nostalgic about, or just some of your favorite Batman reads that you would highly recommend to other comic book fans out there, please consider putting that in the comments. I would love for the comment section to just recommend a bunch of great Batman titles. Anyway, also let me know what you think of this video, this format. I tried to do a tighter top 5 today instead of a top 10, but let me know what you think of the concept, and if you made it this far, sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for watching. This has been The Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, your comment, and maybe check out one of my other videos on your way out. Thank you so much, and have a good one.